When we think of cheerleaders, we may recall some iconic moments from film and television history. But there's one real-life cheerleading story that is just as nail-biting as anything we've seen on screen. And in this story, the big competition is taking place at the Supreme Court. In 2017, 14-year-old Brandy Levy from Mahanoy, Pennsylvania, was upset when she found out she hadn't made the varsity cheer team at her school. She was hanging out with a friend on a Saturday just outside a convenience store when she posted a selfie on Snapchat of her and her friend flipping off the camera. On top of the photo, she wrote, "F school, F softball, F cheer, F everything." The post, like all Snapchat posts, disappeared after 24 hours. But not before someone had shared it, with Brandy's cheerleading coach. Brandy was suspended from cheerleading for a year, supposedly for violating the team's code of conduct. Brandy and her family decided to sue the school district, and her case went all the way to the Supreme Court. Now the court's decision in Brandy's case could impact free speech for all students. How? Let's connect cheerleading to student free speech. And let's start with the ancient Greeks. The Greeks were responsible for many inventions that changed the world. Not pyramids, cheerleaders invented those, but democracy, the catapult, and feta cheese. All of these ideas came from the Greeks. So did the concept of free speech, the right to express oneself without censorship, retaliation, or sanction by the government. The ancient Greek word parrhesia means to speak candidly, and first appeared in Greek literature around the end of the 5th century BC. Parrhesia was embraced by the Greeks, but they also grappled with limitations on freedom of speech. In 399 BC, Socrates was famously tried, convicted, and then executed for the crime of corrupting young Athenian minds with his speech. 2,000 years later, the question of when and how the government can limit our speech persists, including when it comes to students. So what are students' rights when it comes to speech in school? The Supreme Court first tackled this question in 1969. 4 years earlier, 13-year-old junior high student Mary Beth Tinker, her brother John, and another student were suspended for wearing black armbands to school in protest of the Vietnam War. Like the Levys, the Tinker family sued the school district, arguing that suspending Mary Beth and the other students for wearing the armband violated their right to free speech. And in a landmark decision, the Supreme Court ruled that students do not shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. And if that sounds like Greek to you, try this. The First Amendment protects students' right to free speech at school, and school officials can't censor student speech unless it disrupts the educational process. Don't forget about this disruption standard, more on that later. It turns out that American students, like the Greeks before them, have a lot to say. So that's not the last time we heard from the Supreme Court on student speech. For example, what happens when instead of armbands, a student uses a sexually graphic metaphor at a school assembly, or wants to publish controversial articles in the school newspaper, or holds up a poster reading "Bong Hits for Jesus" right outside school during a school-supervised event? Well, there the court said, "Give me an N, give me an O." What does that spell? No way. There's a captive audience of students, and schools are within their rights to censor that speech.
This is not a democracy, it's a cheerocracy. I'm sorry.
So, we know that students have the right to express themselves at school, but also that schools can put some limitations on that free speech. But what about speech that happens outside of school? Can a school place a limit on what, say, a high school cheerleader says after she's hung up her pom-poms for the night? Is a cheerleader always speaking or cheering for her school? Or does she ever just get to be a young person blowing off steam with the full protection of the First Amendment? And there's our connection to cheerleading. When Brandy was suspended for her F-cheer snap, the school district argued that it had the right to punish Brandy for something she had said outside of school on her personal social media account because she was talking about a school activity. If the court agrees with the school's argument in Brandy's case, public schools across the country would be able to punish students anytime they talk about school or to people from school, if the school finds the speech potentially disruptive. Remember the disruption standard we talked about earlier? Student speech outside of school would be held to that standard, which is way stricter and less protective of free speech. The ACLU represented Brandy because the consequences of a win for the school would be far-reaching, way beyond Brandy in her case. If students like Brandy have no safe space to express themselves, they might be deterred from saying anything at all, and parents, teachers, and coaches would lose the chance to hear from them. Also, schools don't need more leeway to punish students for their speech. The First Amendment doesn't stop them from punishing students for bullying when it prevents another student from accessing their education. And besides, schools already have an alternative to punishment for harmful language: education. Giving schools more control over what young people can and cannot say is particularly dangerous for students of color who are already over-policed in schools, or for any student who holds a different, unpopular, or unusual view in their hometown or school. Young people shouldn't be punished for engaging in political activism, or wearing clothes that express their gender identity, or venting to their friends about a school activity on social media. But that's exactly what's at stake here. We want young people to voice their opinions and express themselves because it is their right, and because no one is better poised to speak about issues that impact young people than young people. If we want them to cheerlead the way, we have to let them speak. On the next episode of Let's Connect, we're going to share actions you can take right now to help protect our right to free speech. Together, we'll fight for the lifeblood of our democracy.